hold them, I will hold them. If you would like them at a different time, I can hold them at a different time, although there's kind of a limit to how much I can give. But yes, they're explicitly for you, for whatever benefit you can get from them.
Awesome, and I think I have one more question. So, for the final exam, do you find that people do better on the comprehensive material or on the 70%, like the more recent material?
I've never read the analysis, so I don't know.
See.
But that's a great. I could run an analysis, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would assume people would probably do better on the more recent stuff, but I was wondering.
It's not broken up in a way. In like, there's not a comprehensive chunk 1, new stuff chunk 2. It's all sort of mixed in.
Oh, I see.
That was oh, great! I can hear it.
Maybe.
So I see we have lots of people here. Surely you have something you'd like to ask about. Maybe questions from previous exams, questions from this week's module or last week's module. I have not graded your independent investigations yet. Yesterday was 420. I'm not saying I partook, but I did wind up accidentally buying $400 worth of Legos last night at about 2 o'clock in the morning. So, take your analysis.
Which Lego set was it? I have to know.
I bought several of them, apparently. I bought the big International Space Station, the new 4,000-piece shuttle set. I did not buy the Millennium Falcon because it was out of stock, thank God. But I bought myself an AT-AT, the big 4-legged walker from Star Wars.
If it makes you feel any better, I have also gone through and bought the White House and the Capitol while under the influence.
Nice.
My parents were not happy seeing that charge on the family credit card.
Oh no. Could be worse. She could have bought 15 pounds of sugar-free gummy bears. That wasn't me, but it was friendly.
Well, the worst thing is my parents gave me like an emergency card while I'm at college, so if something happens. No. And I spent $200 on Legos with my emergency card. I was like, whoa, it's a little dangerous.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever shown off my cat, because this is the first time I've been home in a while, so I'm going to show him off. Here he is.
Aww, a sweet boy.
Yeah, he's a little bit annoying, but, I mean, that's okay.
Aren't they all?
Wait, does your cat also have a window thing?
A what?
Dr. Moore, can you show him the window thing you have? That's super cool.
Oh, the window perch?
Aww.
For wee beastie?
No, I don't have one of those. He sits by the door, though, so I think that counts. He's really social right now. He'll sleep later.
I realize none of this has anything to do with forensics.
I'm sorry. When I get to talking about my cat, I can't. Let me try to get some questions here. I thought other people were going to ask a lot, and
I did too. So I got the modules on standby and ready to go.
Will the test be longer? Like, will it be 2 hours?
It's a 60 question, 60-ish. I think there's 61 or 62 odd questions. I don't remember off the top of my head. And you have 70 minutes, which is about the same pace as the rest of the class. So slightly over, I think, 1 minute and 10 seconds or 1 minute and 65 seconds per question. I will say that there are no essay questions on this exam because it's important to get the grades turned around quickly. There may be free responses, so like the fill-in-the-blank kind, but no essays.
Woo! Thank the Lord.
Chloe wants to go over the different microscopes, which I am happy to do. There are several important microscopes. The first is your light microscope, the kind you may have used in biology lab or high school lab or things of that nature. So the purpose of a light microscope is to look at little things. If it is too small to see comfortably with the human eyeball, we're going to augment that with the light microscope. So anything that is small, we're going to pop under there. You can stick two light microscopes together to make a compound light microscope. We will use that particular setup anytime we are comparing small evidence from our crime scene to an exemplar. So hairs, fibers. You can do it with fingerprints, although mostly we go for the computer for fingerprints. But firearm evidence. You can see here. What else will we do? We can use it. We can use it with question documents. It doesn't get done all that often. Glass certainly does. Tool marks. So fine tool marks will all be done under the comparison light microscope. The next microscope is the polarizing or polarized light microscope. The purpose of the PLM is, weirdly, even though it's a microscope, is not really to make things bigger. The purpose of the polarizing light microscope is to measure physical properties of trace evidence. So, physical properties would be the way that your evidence interacts with light. That is a fundamental effect of the material it is made of. So, for example, and I did not learn this until relatively recently, you can identify heroin and fentanyl and cocaine using the polarized light microscope. You don't have to do any additional structural testing, like you don't have to do the GCMS, because of the way these materials bend light. So measuring things like their birefringence, their anisotropy or isotropy, their refractive index, these are all physical properties that we can measure with the PLM. And the reason we would do that is that it is cheaper and in many cases faster than going to our more complicated instruments. You can hook two PLMs together, but nobody does because it's kind of dumb. Because we're measuring something with the PLM, we don't need to make a compound version. The next microscope that is important is the scanning electron microscope. The scanning electron microscope does exist to make super teeny tiny things much more visible. So when I say super teeny tiny, it's going to magnify things by 5,000 to 10,000 times. So we're going to use this for really small stuff, like the cross-section of fibers, or for when we're looking for the particles of gunshot residue. So when you fire a gun and the hammer strikes that primer, it's going to send little blobs out of lead, barium, and antimony. They're super, super tiny. We collect them with the sticky stubs, and then we put them under the scanning electron microscope. The thing about the scanning electron microscope is that it doesn't use light. It uses a beam of electrons. And when you shoot those electrons at a surface, some of them will be reflected in a way to produce X-rays. When you measure the energy at which X-rays are produced, that is indicative of the atoms that are present. So that's how we can use them to identify lead, barium, and antimony in our gunshot residue. Other scientists will use the SEM for other stuff, but that's the primary use for forensic scientists, is tiny fibers and gunshot residue. So there are other kinds of microscopes out there, but those are the big three that are important for forensics. No problem.
Can you explain exactly how ESDA works?
Oh, that's a challenge in and of itself. So the idea is basically, so I have a notebook here, spiral notebook, stack of pages. When I take my ballpoint pen here and I write on something, like, say, I'm going to write your name. As I'm doing so, I am producing friction between my pen and the layers of paper. Because paper is relatively thin and soft, it's also producing friction and pressure onto the layer underneath. So that friction and pressure is causing the indentation to have a very slight positive charge. With the ESDA, we're going to use the corona wire to increase the extent of that charge, so that when we are dealing with like the clean blank layer of paper underneath, we put it on the ESDA, apply an electrical charge, and this will cause the indented parts where that friction was to have a fairly significant positive charge. We then cascade the toner overneath. Toner, because it's little dust particles almost always have a negative charge. That's why we were able to collect them with the electrostatic lifting apparatus. So if the indentations have a positive charge and our little black toner molecules have a negative charge, positive and negative stick together. That's what magnets do, right? Put a positive and a negative pole of a magnet together, it adheres. So that dark toner dips into the indentations and makes even the really, really fine ones that you can't see with the naked eye, and it makes them visible. This allows us to read what, on a blank page, what was previously written on the page above it and has since been removed. So we'd use ESDA anytime there was a stack of paper to recover what was previously written on there. So things like a notebook, Post-it pad, notepad, stack of paper, anything like that could be good for ESDA. The other nice thing about ESDA is if you can show, like, okay, so here I have some numbers written on my Post-it pad here. What they are doesn't really matter. You use ESDA on this Post-it, and you reveal that the page above this used to say 8.5 by 5, 8.25 by 1.78, 5 by 8 and by 1 7/8. At some later point, you find this Post-it. You can now individualize this pad, this one Post-it pad out of the zillions of Post-it pads that the 3M Corporation has made, as the source of this evidence. So that can be, so if we find this on our suspect and this at our crime scene, we can very, very strongly link those, we can associate them in a highly incriminating fashion. So does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Could you find a fingerprint on it?
With ESDA?
Yes.
Not so much. It's not quite that fine. No, you really couldn't. You really couldn't get a fingerprint with ESDA, or with ESLA for that matter.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be more of like ninhydrin to get a fingerprint off of paper?
Bingo. You could also use physical developer, iodine, DFO. That'll work too. So as does, it's all about the indented writing. Oh, how to recover deleted files. That's actually the subject of your discussion post for this week. We have deleted files. There are several ways to do it of increasing difficulty, and it entirely depends on how the files have been deleted. So the easiest way is if someone has just been super lazy and they've deleted it, and it winds up, if you're using a Windows machine, in the trash can, in the recycle bin. If you're using a Mac, it winds up in the trash can. And then it's just, going in there and restoring. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It gets harder, of course. The next way is to take advantage of the fact that your computer is lazy. So your computer, your hard drive or your thumb drive or whatever, is divided into two little parts. The first is a directory. So the directory is a list of all the locations on the hard drive, so all of the addresses, and what is physically present at those locations. So like position 1, you have file A. At position 2, you have some more of file A. At position 3, you have the start of file B. And you have file B at position 4, 5, and 6. At position 7, you have the start of file C. At position 8, it's empty. So you have a list of all of the possible locations and a list of what is there. If you delete something, the computer will mark, use in the file header will say, okay, we're deleting file A. That means that position 1 and 2 are now available for us to stick stuff in. But the computer doesn't actually put anything in those locations until there's an active overwrite. And it doesn't delete the file, the index either, until something new goes there. So if we look in what's called the file table, sometimes if you are familiar with FAT, this is the file allocation table. If you're using a different file system like NFS, there's different ways of doing this, but the principle is largely the same. Is you look and say, aha, file A, the one that has been deleted from my visible file information, used to be at positions 1 and 2, and holy crap, I go look at positions 1 and 2, it's still there. That's easy. That's the easy way. Now we get into the harder way. So, file A used to be at position 1 and 2. It has now been overwritten with file D. Fortunately, so file D is now in position 1, but it's only in position 1. And if you remember, file A took up 1 and 2. So what this means is that if we look at position 1, we're not going to get anything back. But position 2 is now slack space. It's something that is not completely overwritten, so we have pieces of what file A used to look like. We don't get back the whole thing, but we might get enough back to figure out what kind of file it was, or possibly what it looked like. So many types of files, particularly image files, have a lot of error checking built in, and we can sometimes reconstruct those even from partial files. Same things with things like word processing documents or videos. We can often get at least bits of them back from the slack space. The worst way, and this only works on magnetic hard drives, so the ones that use the magnetic files to store the binary information, is file A has been completely overwritten with new stuff. However, its magnetic echo is still there. So where there used to be a 1, if the new file also has a 1 there, the threshold hasn't moved. If there used to be a 0, and now there is a 1, the threshold has moved up, but not quite so far as if there used to be a 1 there, and now there's a new one, there's an additional 1. So we're a little higher. I'm not going to ask you to reconstruct that bit. You need specialized equipment in order to do that level of reconstruction. But it is a way of recovering material that has been completely overwritten to the point that there's no slack data left. So, from easiest to hardest, again, it's in the visible file information, so it's in the recycle bin or trash can. 2, it's in the file exists intact in the device's memory storage, but it's been removed from the file table. 3, it's been partially overwritten, so all we have is what's left in the slack space. And then 4, and again, only for magnetic-based hard drives, we can look at the magnetic resonance signature. I can even do a live demonstration of that second one if you like. I never recorded it, if you want to see it.
I'm up for it.
Yeah, man, if everyone else is cool with it.
Alright, okay. Alright, so here I have standard old thumb drive, right? Okay. If I look at that thumb drive, this is what it appears to contain. So to produce standard set of files. What I want to know is there stuff that used to be on that thumb drive that I can get back? To do so, I'm going to use a tool called Recuva. Requires administrator rights. Yes, thank you. All right. I don't want to spend a zillion days doing this, so I'm going to look in just a specific location, and it is going to run NC here. So what that just did, what Recuva does, is it looks at the file table. So what Recuva can tell me is that there used to be a whole bunch of files on here that aren't anymore. Some of them can be reconstructed. So this stuff right here, this exists in the on the thumb drive. It's not in the file table anymore. So it used to be. So for example, this particular file here, baseline to scale, used to .jpeg, used to be present right here in this view, and it's not anymore. But we should be able to reconstruct it. Yeah. I'm not paying for it. I have in the past, but I don't remember where my okay, now where did I stick it? Oh, why are you being a pain in the butt? It's being a pain in the butt. All right, so it's the wrong file. So I recovered the file that used to be called, I called it Sample Syllabus 217, is completely recoverable. Or would be completely recoverable with this particular piece of programming. And of course, why won't you open? Because you're being a pain in the rectum. That's why. This is being a pain in the rectum, that's why. But there was a whole bunch of stuff on here that we can now, at least, at the very least, even if we can't see it, we know what used to be here, and it appears that this was used for, well, nothing nefarious. There we go. I do recommend that piece of software, by the way. It has saved that, and Mini Partition Wizard has saved me when I've run a thumb drive through the washing machine or done other terrible things to it.
So the ones that are labeled poor, could you open them, or how does that work?
So the ones that were poor, they had stuff overwritten, so there was nothing there to recover. There was no slack. This particular piece of software doesn't look at the slack space, so it knows something used to be there because it's in the file record, but it can't pull it back.
So what's the difference between that and unrecoverable?
So unrecoverable poor might be that there's little bits of it, it's stored in at 5 a whole bunch of different addresses, probably 18, 20 different little sectors. 1 or 2 of them may be still intact. That would be poor. If all of them are completely overwritten, that would be completely unrecoverable with this particular tool. Other questions? Feel free to ask.
Can you go over what the review sheet is? I got here a little bit late. You were just ending it whenever I came in.
Oh, so the review sheet. One side 8.5 by 11 or spiral. You can handwrite it, you can print it, I don't care. The only thing that you need to be aware of is when you take your exam, and you may want to do some testing with this with your own computers or laptops or tablets, webcam, is that when you take the exam, I can see enough of your environment to verify that you really are just using one side of one page. So, for example, I just tilted down my webcam because mine's a separate device. So you can see my desk here. And if I saw this, I'd be like, what the heck is this stuff over here? I'd put that away before I took the real test.
Thank you.
That's really all there is to it.
So before taking the exam, would it be good to do something like this, like during the setup, to show you both sides of the page?
Yes, please.
I don't want to be unfair to go over like the stuff that's due tonight on the quiz. But
No, that's totally legit. That's totally legit. That's not unfair.
Good.
I won't tell you what the answer is, but I can put you on the right path.
Oh, good. I do feel comfortable with all of it, so I think just a basic summary would be good for me.
In what way? I don't understand what you're asking me for.
So is it okay if I just go through like each question, just kind of get a basic like idea of them?
Yeah, sure.
So for the first question, it says the first thing to do at a crime scene to protect the electronic evidence is. I'm gonna assume that destroy them. I might just rule that one out. But that's pretty much this. The answer is pretty much basic to all crime scenes, which would be like limiting the people that can go in and out. So not having just like anyone walk through and touch the evidence and like move stuff around.
In sharing screen, I lost my quiz here. So let me get to the question. We're on digital forensics. Next to last. Okay. That's a good sense of logic that yes, an electronic crime scene is like a regular old crime scene, that you still have issues of contamination. You don't want to transfer any evidence, and you certainly don't want to allow any digital evidence to be changed between when you enter the crime scene and when you go to analyze it, or God forbid, when you go to present it on the stand. So yes. That is absolutely solid logic.
And so for question 2, is there generally a rule for what types of powders to use for latent prints on computers?
The general rule is you use whatever is going to give you the most contrast. One of the things that often gives you really good contrast is the shiny metallic. That's often really great. But you don't want to use any kind of powder that could cause a gumming up of the works. Anything that's going to leave even the slightest bit of sharp particulates that could damage, small items like your hard drive. I will say that this is less of an issue for modern computers that have fewer moving parts. Like, this used to be a huge problem for things with floppy drives, because you get any sort of powders in general, but in particular sharp flake powders. Get those into a floppy drive and they will just tear up the guts of your machine. But for optical materials, for Solid-state devices for flash drives, less of an issue, but there are still enough mechanical hard drives around that we don't want to use anything with sharp edges. And it is possible that some of these answers aren't things you would use in fingerprint powder because, for example, they catch on fire when exposed to air.
Oh. That'd be pretty easy to rule out then.
Yeah.
So for question 3, let's see. So I know what JPEG and PDF files are. What would exactly be like a gigabyte data or bitstream data? What are those two?
So gigabyte data copy sounds cool. Is it a thing? Like if you Googled gigabyte data copy, is that even a thing? A bitstream data copy is definitely a thing. A bitstream data copy is where every single a bit, 1 or 0, the tiniest amount of digital information it is possible to represent. A bitstream data copy is every single bit, literally, of information, including blank space, erased space, deleted stuff, slack stuff. All that is in your is in a bitstream data copy.
I see. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's good. And
This is useful, perhaps feedback to all of you. If it seems reasonable but you've never heard of it, it sometimes is worth a Google. Because I am totally not above including reasonable sounding but totally fake things as answers. Now, this is not something you can look up on a test, but I also do it on tests. So, helpful hint, if you've never heard of it at all, it's probably not the right answer.
you know, I think they should make a gigabyte data copy though, because that does sound legit.
It does. It does.
So other personal forensic evidence collected at the crime scene would include...
Keyword there is personal. So, what is going to be individualizing to a person?
I see. So DNA or... Well, yeah. I see. And... the number one problem with surveillance videos is usually caused by...
So the answer to this, go watch some YouTube videos of surveillance and look at what tends to cause the most difficulties with figuring out who is in the video, or like Ring videos, like of people like porch pirates.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll be really nice, and at other times you'll be like, "What on earth am I looking at?" And there are some common themes as to why those videos are not terribly useful.
That makes sense. Okay, multi-jurisdictional issues when examining electronic data include... let me ask, what would you say is multi-jurisdictional issues?
So multi-jurisdictional are super common with computer crimes because where the criminal's computer is may not actually be where the crime, when they are physically located, may not be where the crime took place. So, for example, if you were distributing illegal content, but you were sharing it through a VPN that was based out of Norway, the crime, you did it, but you committed it in Norway, where they have their own set of rules. So multi-jurisdictional may mean that we have to consider, okay, who has priority and what specific details do they need in order to successfully prosecute a crime.
Is that like extraterritorial rights?
It can be. So it can be, but it can also be as limited as even here in the United States. So, for example, many but not all states have rules on distribution of revenge porn, like nudes of a former partner, sharing those with or without their consent. Other states have different rules on there. So where the person is located where the victim is located and where the distribution point is for the content, even though they may all be within the United States, may all have different rules about what governs whether they're doing something legal but shady or illegal and also shady.
It sounds like it would be particularly relevant in the U.S. due to how like fragmented it is with the states.
Yep. Yes. White-collar crime and computer crime is some of the lowest prosecuted, but by percentage rate, prosecuted at very, very low rates. This is due to a number of reasons, partially because the white-collar crime in general is low prosecution rate, but the cops and investigators and DAs don't know how to do it effectively, and the perpetrators are so sophisticated that it's really hard to present enough information in the right jurisdiction to nail them for committing crimes. The one exception is copyright violation, because it turns out that the MPAA and the music distributors, through passage of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, actually put the pieces into place where they could successfully prosecute people who did things like, I had a friend in graduate school who got busted by the campus, by the MPAA by the RIAA for downloading Jordan Sparks videos, Jordan Sparks songs using the campus network. He was so embarrassed. But there you go.
That's a whole can of worms. That could probably be like a whole sub-module.
Oh, it could. Many people have asked for a digital forensics class, and it is a really challenging subject to teach because you need a fair amount of knowledge on how computers works and how computer networks work in order to take it beyond the most absolutely superficial, which is unfortunate. But yeah, you're right. You're totally right.
Before moving on, I should admit that I do know who Jordan Sparks is, and I do listen to her music sometimes. Do feel the need to put that out there, but
There's nothing. I am not shaming anyone for their musical taste, but he was really ashamed because he was mostly known among the left for being a big fan of heavy metal, and so it was really the dichotomy of why he got busted.
God. Oh, man. So the forms of electronic surveillance.
Does it plug into a wall? It's electronic.
Got it. So I don't think guard dogs or security guards are great options.
We're not living in Futurama or Westworld, so I would go with, yeah, that's good logic.
So for the other two, let's see. Okay, camera surveillance, digital surveillance.
Digital surveillance would be things like keyloggers, or if you have, so for example, pandemic related, many workplaces have software that monitors their workers' computers to make sure that you're actually like moving your mouse around and working, as opposed to you have your computer on but you're not doing anything. So that would be digital surveillance. Alternatively, it would be like intercepting someone's emails and reading them before or after they were delivered, that sort of thing. Digital surveillance is sort of what is your behavior like on the computer.
I see. So I wanted to say camera surveillance is under the umbrella of digital surveillance. Well, I guess
You could maybe make that argument. The only difference is that some camera surveillance, it does run on analog. So, for example, if you're using tapes as opposed to digital storage like a DVR, most closed circuit cameras these days do work on digital storage. Like they just have a big hard drive that they're recording the footage to. But there are still some that run on VHS tapes, That's camera surveillance, but it's not really considered digital. It's analog. Because it's storing the information as a magnetic waveform on a tape as opposed to binary data. That's beyond the scope of that module.
I see.
So many of you, I'm so glad to see that there are a number of people here, but they're all very quiet.
I know.
So thank you, Ben and Lewis and Peyton for speaking up. And Chloe for asking a question. Oh, and Alexis did too. So okay. Lexi, sorry, I was.
So did Ben.
I said Ben. Ben was the first person I mentioned.
Thank you, Ben.
That was my bad. I thought you said Lewis.
I also.
We all showed up, okay? We all get
You did.
participation points.
Okay, I won't say that you get participation points, but I'm betting that you will do better on the quiz that's due tonight than people who didn't or were not able to show up. Oh, I just got some great spam inviting me to sign up for Biden Care. They only want my social security number in order to verify my tax information.
You know what? This is perfect timing for the next question, which would be... Oh, man. I love that.
Identity theft?
Yeah. It's this one I think is pretty much... Yeah, it's true or false, but... identification of identity theft, it's a major area of work for digital forensics. I would say false if it said it's only the work of digital forensics, but I think that one's pretty straightforward.
Did you know that one of the major people who employ people with training in digital forensics are credit card companies?
Oh, interesting. And that does make sense. A good question. Some forms of computer communication can completely bypass storing information on the hard drive.
Yes, they.
I'm sorry.
So, when your Bluetooth headset is connected to your computer and it's transferring audio from the YouTube video that you're watching, your hard drive isn't storing that anywhere. It's just transmitting directly between source and destination.
I see. I'm not very good at...
So if we wanted to capture, for example, I don't have recording turned on. So if we wanted to capture the audio stream for this Zoom communication, it's not recorded anywhere. It's live. It's being broadcast, but then it's gone.
I see.
It's temporarily running through your RAM, but that's about it. So as a result, there are things that are not recoverable. They existed very briefly, but in a volatile way that we can't get back.
I see.
So would another example of that be Snapchat?
Snapchat is an interesting one because I could be wrong because I'm not super familiar with how Snapchat works, but I think it is briefly saved on your device with explicit instructions from the app to nuke it shortly after. So what you have there is the deleted from device may still remain in the file table, or they may explicitly use the same spot to store things and then immediately overwrite it. I don't know, but that may be how it could work.
I was just trying to think of a more like relatable thing.
Yeah, I know. I started to say Snapchat, but because I don't know enough about how it works, I couldn't say for either way. All right.
How are you going to show off your new Lego set if you don't have Snapchat?
'Cause I'm old and don't have any Snap friends. No, it's true. None of my friends.
See, I'm young and I don't have any Snap friends, so.
Yeah,
Like, all my friends are old enough that we're all still on Facebook. And that's about it. None of us are cool. That's alright.
You need Instagram. That's a good in-between.
I don't like Insta. I hate the proliferation of the way people use the hashtags. Like, if you're gonna tell a story, just write a damn story. Don't give me a bunch of hashtags like, is this a breakfast burrito or not? I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, Lexi asks, how do you recommend memorizing the presumptive tests for the drugs and their names or results? So for the final exam, I would focus on the difference between what is presumptive and what is confirmatory. Like, what do those two terms mean? How would you use those tests differently? I don't know that we had any presumptive tests. Oh, we do have them for the drugs. That would be a great case for flashcards because that's just rote memory. Like, for example, knowing that marquee, mech, and mandolin are going to go with your opiates. That Scott reagent goes with your cocaine and it turns pink if you have a positive for cocaine, or blue and pink bilayer if you have crack. Yay, crack! You've got Ehrlich for LSD, Dilicompagni for barbiturates. Let's see here, what else do we have? Duquesnoy-Levine for weed, although I don't know anybody who actually uses Duquesnoy-Levine. You're just like, yep, it's weed. It's a plant. It smells like ass. It's weed. It's crap. It smells skunky. It's weed. So I would say flashcards or Quizlet may be your best bet there because that's just rote memory.
I also have found some other Quizlets that are like just for FIS in general that have helped me with the memorization.
They might be from previous people who took this class in previous semesters even.
Well, they're not. They just say FIS, like, and in the course they don't say whether it's at WVU or not. So I just.
If it's FIS 201, it's almost certainly us. I don't know of anybody else that uses FIS 201 as our course identifier name. I will say that statements that are true don't change, but the focus of the course does change a little bit from semester to semester. Less so for an online presentation because there's less of this kind of thing where people ask a question and I get to talk about or expand upon a particular area. You just have videos with my lovely speaking voice. Or they're the people who've listened to me at 1.25 speed, so I sound like a chipmunk all the time. Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
No way. Why do
Yes
they
way.
listen pretty fast? What's the point?
Because then you can get through a lecture in 30 minutes.
But you can't tell if we've listened to it or not, can you?
Yeah, no, they told me that they were like, I can't believe you actually sound like that. I'm so used to hearing you at 1.5 speed.
Yeah, that was me.
I wasn't gonna name names. I wasn't gonna name names.
I did that for the first 3 weeks of class, yeah. Then I realized I wasn't learning it, so I needed to go slower.
It's
my
all right.
problem is
I'm
I
not
always listen to
insulted.
you. My problem is I always listen to you when I'm doing the laundry, so now I just associate you with doing laundry. And the other day, like, I didn't have to do laundry, I was listening to your course, and I was like, I should be doing something. What's going on?
Quite so.
So I have a question. How do you tell, like, what's like the main difference between amphetamines and opioids?
Amphetamines are uppers, opioids are downers.
Okay, and what's like the what are like benzos classified as?
They're uppers.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. They're benzos are downers. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of them. So anything that treats things like anxiety or depression or people who can't sleep, that's going to be some sort of central nervous system depressant. Now this, when I say depressant, people sometimes think, oh, it makes you sad. No, depressant just means that it decreases the activity of your fight or flight side of your central nervous system. So it allows you to slow down, calm down, and relax. So that's going to be things like our Xanax, things like our benzodiazepines, heroin, morphine, all of the opiates are going to slow things down. And that's their allure as drugs, is that they make you feel calm and relaxed and peaceful. And doesn't that sound wonderful? Or in the case of heroin, you feel super awesome rush, and then you're like, I'm just going to sleep for like 36 hours. Stimulants such as our amphetamine class are going to increase the activity of your sympathetic nervous system. So they're going to provide more energy, more focus, more ability to do stuff. So things like your Adderall, which is an amphetamine, actually it is straight up amphetamine, your methamphetamines, your ecstasy, your cocaine, those are all going to be providing zip and energy, etc. The weird thing about Adderall, and this, you're getting into something that I teach in FIS 320, illicit drugs, is that for people with the ADHD brain chemistry, Adderall has a paradoxical effect. And for people with our normal brain chemistry, so that's most people, Adderall, you're so much energy that you can't sit down, but you will be totally super focused on like one thing, like picking at your skin for 36 hours. For people with the ADHD brain chemistry, instead of making you bounce, all over the place, it actually allows you to focus the energy you have where you want it to go. So different brain chemistries can have really interesting effects with different classes of drugs. So Lewis, as you point out, Adderall is a stimulant. It's not it's in the amphetamine class. It is not a depressant. Is that what you're asking, Ben, or were you asking how do we use the presumptive tests to tell them apart?
No, I just wanted like a clarification for like the difference between them. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So weed is a Schedule I drug at the federal level, at the United States level. This means that you cannot use, even if you have a medical prescription, if you are employed by the federal government, you are not permitted to consume cannabis at all. We cannot use any federal tax money to support research into it, only for enforcement and reduction. However, individual states have changed the rules for that drug. For almost every other drug out there, the states use the same rules as the feds. The penalties are just different. For cannabis, most states realized that it was that weed, in terms of its risks and harms, was really different than something like heroin or LSD or other extremely synthetic cathinones that tear up your kidneys, PCP, or actually PCP is Schedule 2, drugs that are more profoundly risky or have a much more immediate effect on your body. So the states were like, well, this is stupid. And so they either, made it possible to have medical prescriptions, or they allowed recreational use, or they decriminalized it. So at the state level, cannabis and weed may be legal-ish, but at the federal level, it's not. And if you think that's stupid, it totally is. Heroin, on the other hand, as an opiate, is a Schedule I drug for every state. So it is the most, so selling it or possessing it has the highest penalties, and that is true in every state and at the federal level as well.
That's like, well, so there's like this program in like Charleston, like a couple hours south of Morgantown, where it's like, if like heroin addicts, they can go in and like replace their needles because there's a problem in getting like infections.
Yep.
I just feel like it's not enforced very harshly. I feel like they're kind of content to let people go and use heroin.
Yeah, so there's a difference between legalization and what's called decriminalization. Decriminalization means that there's a law on the books, but it's just not enforced because enforcing it isn't beneficial to the police or to the people or to the society that they live in. And for heroin addicts, the problems of things like Hep C, AIDS, and other infections wind up costing the state and the society, and certainly the individuals, much more than changing out needles for something that is clean. Notice that we are not providing them heroin. You have to bring your own heroin, or you have to bring your own other drugs, but it is what's called a harm reduction approach as opposed to a penalty approach. Because the science really tells us that the penalty-based approach, unless you are dealing drugs, doesn't do anything. If you are a user of drugs, harm reduction effects vastly improve both likelihood of success at kicking addiction, or at least kicking the harmful drug habits, and of additional, being on Medicare, Medicaid, needing organ transplants or communicable diseases and other issues as well.
Couldn't you consider that enabling, though?
And that's the counter argument. And I'm not saying, and both sides absolutely have a point here. That by the question though is, which one has worse outcomes? If tolerating the drug winds up having fewer negative results in terms of community infections, overdose deaths, etc., than the penalty side of things, even though it kind of goes against the grain to say, yeah, we're letting you do a dangerous drug there in public. I mean, that's many people that's a hard thing to accept. What does the data actually say?
Because Portugal, they decriminalized all their drugs a while ago, and they've seen good results from it.
They have. Not
All
perfect.
All I know is that home, like, I get these shots for birth control, and at home, when I pick it up from the pharmacy, I get a vial. Here, they give me, like, the straight needle, like, filled, and I'm like, what is going on? You're just handing this to me.
It's not illegal to buy a syringe.
I'm telling you, it feels legal walking around with it.
Dr. Moore, I hate to ask this question, but I can't stop thinking about it. So, what if you were to take an upper and a downer drug at the same time?
Oh, a speedball! That is how so many people have died. That's how Heath Ledger died. That's how Philip Seymour Hoffman died. So when you're taking... So every drug that you take affects a particular part of your nervous system. Where things... And in many cases, so for example, in the case of opiates, they affect your opioid receptors. Your opioid receptors are found on throughout your brain. They're also found, and they affect the brain's interactions with your muscles. So if you take a whole bunch of opiates, so heroin, morphine, whatever, it tends to cause you to stop breathing and your heart to slow down. That's bad. If you mix that with a stimulant that causes other parts of your body, like say cocaine, the classic speedball, coke and heroin. Cocaine interacts primarily with a different receptor entirely called the NMDA. When it does that, it causes the heart to try and beat faster. So now your heart is getting completely different signals from two different sets of nerves. It's trying to beat faster and slower at the same time. And much like rubbing your head and patting your belly, this is really hard for any organ to do. So this is really what leads to the dangerous parts. I mean, it can be an incredible rush for your brain because different parts are your brain, of course, doesn't really do anything. Okay, I hesitate to say your brain doesn't do anything. Your brain doesn't have a functional purpose like digesting food or circulating blood. Its whole point is to coordinate everything else going on. So if we take a bunch of different drugs at once, you get all of that different stimulation going on in your brain at once. And apparently from people who've done it, it's really intense and an extraordinary experience. But your body is now trying to do too many things in too many different directions at the same time, and it can be really, really hard on all of your organ systems, particularly your liver. It can really lead to liver failure, heart failure, and unfortunately, seizures as well. Because if you try and take an upper and downer that hits, it's a receptor called GABA. If you turn up the GABA receptor, you lose your ability to coordinate your muscles. If you turn it down, you get a sudden stream of input. So if you try and do both at the same time, now your muscles are just flailing around all the time. That's bad enough if it's a skeletal muscle, so like your arms doing the flippy floppy. It's really bad if it's your diaphragm, because now you cannot breathe on a regular basis. So mixing uppers and downers, while it's like a great experience for your brain, not a great experience for your body.
So I'm not expecting you to know this, but the experience to your brain, would that be similar to like mushrooms or LSD?
No, it would be mostly extraordinarily sense of, if we stick with cocaine and heroin, the rush, the sensation that you are absolutely on top of the world, you are racing down the roller coaster, would be extreme, even compared to one or the other drug at the same time. You would feel like, if you've ever been in a situation where you just wanted to yell woohoo, if you wanted to be a woo girl or woo boy, any woo person, that feeling of, oh my god, this is awesome, but you just turn that all the way up, crank off the knob. That's the sensation. That's why your brain feels so awesome. Now, if you mix a psychedelic like LSD with an upper like cocaine, you have the attention span of a gnat. Like, you literally cannot pay attention to anything because your brain is darting off in 6,000 directions at once, and the walls are breathing at the same time. Polypharmacy is fun. So yes, it really depends on what classes of drugs you're mixing together when you do mix drugs, but it does rapidly become hazardous for your body.
That's good. I was wondering, because I think it was Jimi Hendrix, the singer who used to you know what I'm talking about, just take like a handful of pills from...
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is that most of the pills he were taking were all of the same class. They were all mostly amphetamines, so that's... You get a more intense experience, but it's all sort of on the same track. So it's hard on your body, but it's less hazardous than trying to do a bunch of different things at once.
And I know you do have a class. Go ahead.
And this is why people enjoy drugs. My drugs class.
No, you really helped me. I'll do research to see what drugs I could do here in the future. So I appreciate it. I'm kidding.
If you find real LSD, let me know. That's like the Great Buffalo. It's all LSA and LDE and other analogs. You never get the real thing. They keep busting the big labs.
I'll send you an email if I find it.
Not that I'm saying that you should do LSD. That would of course be wrong.
Send it to our school email. Send it to our school email.
That would of course be wrong for me as an educator and a forensic scientist to encourage anyone to break federal law.
But if you do...
No, I literally have a legal disclaimer that I have to read before my other class, because we, like, literally the other day, I am not kidding whatsoever, we learned to make meth. The first lecture in the first class is, you should not do this. You should not use the things you learn in this class to conduct illegal behavior. You are, as a FIS student, you are held to certain behavioral standards, blah, 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 that the legal department came up with and I have to read.
But does that ever weigh on you, like, morally?
No.
That you're like, oh, I could easily make myself...
I know how to murder people. I know how to murder people. I can tell you how to murder people. I'm not overly concerned that you're going to go out and use my instructions on stabbing people in the eye to go out and really do it. But all of us have knowledge that is terrible, and we don't do terrible things for the most part.
I guess that's why there are so many true crime fans.
Fair enough. Alright, any other questions about I realized that digression into speedballs had nothing to do, or very little to do, with FIS 201.
It's okay, you just like talking about drugs. It's alright.
I like to talk. That's why I'm a professor. Because I'm too fat to be an actress. I will talk.
Have you ever thought about being a comedian?
I'm not funny enough off the cuff, but if there was a stand-up scene in this town, I'd at least try it once.
Because it's really like, oh yeah. Chloe, I definitely wish we had her in person too. So I feel like
I miss you guys so much. I'm so happy that
Great
we're going back to be
entertainment.
in person in the fall. I miss having my in-person class.
It's like an hour of laughter is what it would be. It wouldn't even be class.
Not that far off the mark.
I wanted to see the fruit trauma. That would be like...
Yes, fruit trauma. Well, hearing no other real questions, I do have some other stuff that I need to... real questions, class sort of things. We'll certainly hold this again next Wednesday. If you have other questions between now and then, you can sign up for office hours. They are open to you. And I will hold this again next week. By next week, I will also have a time and date for a big review for the final exam. I will try and have that on the weekend. If I have it on the weekend, people who work weekends can't attend. If I have it during the weekday, people have exams or they have other. There's no making everybody happy, but I'll do my best. But so yeah. Hearing nothing else, thank you for joining me this afternoon, and hopefully you will do well on the rest of your assignments this week. And I'll see you later.
Thanks, Dr. Moore.
Peace.